I hope you don't mind if I bring this up. I think it's really fascinating that you're deaf in one ear, but that's where you hear through. So, I mean, it's almost a gift in an odd kind of way. I'm wondering then, for people who do have their full hearing and all of their senses function as normal, so to speak. I wonder if, because you have less chatter and it seems like you've got an almost direct, acknowledgeable telecommunication device built into your head, how can somebody who has all of their senses functioning, how can they clear the chatter and know that they've opened a channel?
So that's a really excellent question, and I will fall on my sword a little bit on this one. Yes, we can call it a gift that I hear this way. I think that the fact that I heard it on that side was just spirit shaking me and saying, Erika, this is a real thing. Now, many people do not need to be shaken in that way. I did. I needed to hear it's not childbirth, or I would have kept doing that Harvard thing of bearing down, bearing down, bearing down. There are people who just intrinsically know that there is that access. It's just about being quiet. Now, there's certain things you can do. So, for example, I always light a candle. I have a candle lit now. Anytime I'm reading for someone, I consult, help college applicants with their college essays. I always light a candle if I'm using the cards for that. Another thing that I do is I read on a field. Now, what does that mean? For me, ideally, it's a black napkin, black linen napkin, but it doesn't have to be, and I don't actually need a field, but it kind of focuses my attention. I mean, I've read in crowded restaurants and used a white napkin because that's what they've given me, but I don't even really need the napkin. I mean, I've read on park benches too, but then you have to sort of, it helps to visualize a field. This is your workspace, so to speak, and it's sacred, you know. I always, I'm a Reiki master, and so I'll just always, before I start, I'll put my hand on my heart, just to sort of connect. There are 1,000 ways you can do it, and there's no wrong or right way. It's whatever feels right to the person. And more than just sort of having a tool, it's just, I think it's more than that. It's about being open, just acknowledging the possibility that what we see, hear, taste, smell, touch is not all there is. That's all you really need in order to open up.
Right, right. I love that you work with students in helping them to guide what they'll be doing. How did that go over when you first started?
So that's really funny. So I've always done this. I've done this, I've done college advising forever. I was assistant director of admissions at Princeton and at Columbia. I'm an interviewer for Harvard. I interview students who want to apply to Harvard. And I've been all over the world speaking to people about, what elite colleges look for. This work, which I've done for maybe 12, 13 years, I've added into my repertoire. And at first I thought, do I do that, or do I keep them totally separate? So I got headhunted by a company in California. They're chill out there, right? So I said, listen, I have this thing that I do, and it might not be for everybody, but it might be for some people. They loved the idea, and what it does is it kind of, well, again, with all my clients, no matter what they come to me for, my big goal is to show them their own agency and aegis and power, right? So the cards are a great way to show students that they're going to land in the right place. They won't land in the wrong place, that they have a right to have opinions about what they are looking for, what they're not looking for, that they are as much the consumer as a college is. There is, because eventually, right, like when they get admitted, technically they're admitted to many schools, right? So that at that point, they get to pick and choose. So I try to have my students see themselves as consumers, and using the cards with them just gives them a sense of their own aegis, I think. And that's not something that young people are often given. For example, one of the things that students have to do, and this is the part that I like the most, is they have to write a personal essay. But no culture that I know of encourages students to think reflectively in that way about themselves. They're taught to be modest or self-effacing or don't brag. And in this essay, you're not asked to brag. You're asked to speak truthfully about who you are. That's really hard for students, but the cards can definitely help facilitate that, because a lot of people don't know who they are, but your higher self knows who you are. So that when I pull a spread and say what I say, students will say, "Oh, how did you know?" I said, "Because you told, your higher self told me that." And it resonates because that's where it's coming from. So it goes over really well. Funny.
That's awesome. I wish I'd had somebody like you back in the day. Now we're running just a little bit low on time. I want to make sure that we haven't left anything out, that there isn't anything still on your mind that you think we should go ahead and discuss today.
I think that I think one thing that I would like to say as an African American, I don't use that term, Black, as a Black reader, is that I'd like to see more Black readers of all Oracle types be represented in the larger community. I think one of the, I come from the real world, so to speak, where I taught at a public school and all that. And when I entered this world, this mystical, magical world, I thought, oh, race isn't a thing. Isn't that not? Well, of course, race is a thing. Race is a thing no matter where you go. And I'd like to see more inclusion, more dialogue between people who practice different traditions. I think that's really important because, there is no group of people on earth who has sprung up without having some sense of the other, the spiritual, the mystical, and if we had more dialogue about that, maybe we could see ourselves more clearly, I think, and each other more clearly.
Yeah. I'm really glad that you brought that up, because there really aren't that many people of color that, in my experience, in searching for people for summits, that it's rather unusual. Do you have any idea why that is?
I think the space is not always welcoming. That's what I think. When I came into this work, nobody really necessarily knew what I looked like. They just knew I was really good. And I became known because the greats of the card world, what I didn't know is that they don't participate in these forums that are out there, but they watch them and they see who's doing what. And that's how I met Carrie. That's how I met Rana. That's how I met, and I found those greats very welcoming, very supportive, very aware that in order for our art to grow, more people need to be aware of it. But I think once you get out of that level of ether of the greats, you find that this world, this mystical, magical world, is just like every other part of our world, fragmented and fractured, insular, and then because it's mystical, magical, people feel all the more reason to sort of be grounded in their opinion about who knows what they're talking about and who doesn't. So I feel that there are spaces that could be more welcoming. There are some that really are, but it really needs to grow. I mean, for example, there's a Lenormand deck that I love that nobody knows about. It's called the Grandma Baby Lenormand. It's black. It's a black Lenormand. It's so cool. It's the best one. And then there's another one. I think this is tarot. The Dust to Onyx Melanated Tarot deck. Why those decks and those creators are not getting more press, I don't know. Now, I'm not an artist. My art is my words. That's my art. But there are great creators out there that really need to be showcased. And listen, this might sound controversial, but we're dealing with a lot. We're grappling with a lot, especially since George Floyd's death. And I think white people are having quite the, pardon the mixed metaphor, come to Jesus moment. Who are we really? What bill of goods have we been sold? And why were we sold it? And why did we buy it? And what does that mean? This kind of work can be really helpful in addressing those kinds of questions. But that's the kind of work that if we could do it together, instead of talking sort of in a vacuum, only amongst ourselves, but together, realizing that we're all supported by spirit, the same spirit, I think it could be a really healing, helpful thing. And yeah, so that's what I have to say on that.
I'm so glad that you went there. Thank you so very much, because as I mentioned, it's hard to find people of all different complexions, melanization, whatever the
well, you said I want to say this. You thanked me for going there. Let me just say, one of the big problems that I see is that people don't want to go there because it's awkward. Like, what do you say? What if you say the wrong thing? Well, what if you say the wrong thing? Will the sky fall? I don't think so. What if you make a mistake? What if you do say something? Well, then you'll be informed, and then you'll know, and you will learn a new way to approach it. I think so much of how this issue is addressed by white people anyway is fear-based, and I understand why, but it's just not helpful. It's just not helpful.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's a difficult sort of a minefield, walking on glass. We want to communicate, but what if you say the wrong thing? What
if you say the wrong thing? You say the wrong thing.
Right.
My mother had a saying. She used to say, I desegregated a school when I was 8 years old. In New York City, it was one of the fancy girls' prep schools. There's a lot of controversy now in the New York Times, in fact, as recently as last week, about race and these schools. But I went to a school called Nightingale Bamford. And when I was 8, and so I was so excited, I put my uniform on for the first time, and my mother said, I want you to remember this. When your hand is in the lion's mouth, you have to dance to his music. And I thought, what is she talking about? First of all, we're not going to the zoo. Where's the lion? And what, the lion's going to play music? And why would I dance? Well, essentially what she was saying is, you're walking into an alien land. Be careful. Watch what comes out of your mouth. Watch how you conduct yourself, because it can destroy you. Well, growing up, I went there for 10 years, from 8 to 18. And I always had that advice in the back of my head, but with a twist. I used to test it all the time. For example, what if you turn off the lion's music? What if you do a different dance? What if the lion wants you to dance to that music and you just don't? And what if your arm gets bitten off? Will it regenerate? Can you use your other hand? If you have both your hands bitten off, do you still have legs? If they take your legs, do you still have your voice? This is what I mean about non-action out of fear. It's not helpful. It's not helpful. And we can learn really interesting lessons when we go into that lion's den, or what we perceive to be the lion's den. We may find it's not lions at all, that it's a bunch of puppies. We may see that we maybe need to be nipped to wake up. And that all sickness, as Ralph Ellison, the writer of Invisible Man, said, that all sickness is not unto death. That we can survive doing hard things, that we can learn from people who have forged generations of doing hard things. And so I think that this mystical, magical world, I mean, I think you could play a part in that if it chose to, but because we're mystical, magical, we also like to think that we're above that, and we're not. We're still human beings, you know, who have to breathe, to take in air. We live in a very dense planet, right? That requires us to breathe and eat and go to the bathroom and do all those things. But we're here for a reason, which is to lift up the vibration of all of us. Mm-hmm. And sometimes that's hard. So what? We can rest when we're dead. That's my theory.
Absolutely. Oh my goodness, Erika, this has been such an enlightening and wonderful conversation. I thank you so much for spending some time with us today. This has been just wonderful. Thank you.
Well, thank you for being such a good listener and for those terrific questions. It was my pleasure.